We're going to go back in time a little bit and look at the works of Antonio Pisanello. Now, for him, you might just want to think of around 1440. We're going to look at some works from the 1430s and some into the 1440s. He was born in Verona, and he worked in many, many places in Italy, Venice, Ferrara, Rome, other places. But as far as we know, he never went to Florence. And one of the things that he's very famous for is his animal studies. Many of his drawings survive, and so we can see that he has drawn from life many of the different animals that he then paints in his paintings. Sometimes he also draws things that aren't animals. You have in your textbook, I didn't bring it in, the pictures of hanged men, which certainly would have been something you could have seen in a Renaissance city. But here we want to look at these animal studies. They're done in pen with a very, very delicate shading, a lot of attention to detail. As we've said before, Renaissance artists like to show that they can show the horse from the rear and also show the horse from the front, this foreshortened view that shows that you are very capable of foreshortening and showing space. We're going to look at a fresco of St. George and the Princess, and I'll explain that story. The fresco is from the latter years of the 1430s, 1437 to 8, and it is in the church of Sant'Astasia in Verona, his hometown. Now, when you look at reproductions of it, it doesn't look like it was in really good shape. Parts of it were painted au secco. He's obviously added a lot of gold and detail and richness, so it makes it very courtly. But of course, as we know, something like that does flake off with time. The story of St. George, of course, is that he was a knight. He was a warrior for Christ. And he fought with a dragon, a symbol of the devil or of evil, and he defeated the dragon. And of course, the dragon wanted to devour the princess. So you often see the beautiful princess nearby. You may remember this from the predella to Donatello's St. George, where he showed George actually battling the dragon with the princess off to one side. Donatello's princess was dressed in classical garments. Our princess here with the Donatello's princess was dressed in classical garments, but Pisanello's princess is dressed with a very courtly costume, very elegant, and also that beautiful profile view of the face with the high shaved forehead that was considered so elegant and so beautiful in the Renaissance in the 15th century. And her dress would have been covered with many details that would be picked out in gold. But of course, much of that has flaked off over the centuries. This suggests that he is painting with an eye to the elegance of the Italian courts for whom he often worked. And here we have that drawing of the horse, and then here we have the horse bedecked, as it were, with the extremely elaborate bridle. And see how he could put this to use in an actual painting. In the background of the painting, we have a lot of sort of naturalistic details, very exotic in a sense. You have this idea of someone who seems to be maybe a Tartar, someone from Asia, so a kind of ethnic group. And then, of course, the hanged men, and we have the drawings that he did for the hanged men. A reference to, think back to Ambrogio Lorenzetti showing Securitas, his allegorical figure that flies above the peaceful landscape of the countryside under good government. And Ambrogio Lorenzetti is showing that the way to have this peaceful world is for your good governors to hang the evil doers, so they're not there to prey on the virtuous citizens. So this is seen as scene of justice in a sense. It may not be our well, may not be our concept of justice, but it was theirs. When you're looking at this, you're not seeing anything like linear perspective. He may have known it, but he didn't choose to use it. But you have all of these very interesting details, including a very detailed cityscape, as you can see. Dogs, horses, a bit of landscape, even a seascape with a boat floating by with billowing sails. This is another one of Pisanello's paintings. It's the Vision of Saint Eustace, and this one is a panel painting. And you see there's no horizon at all. So it gives us the feeling that it's flat, like a tapestry hanging down. But then if you look closer at the details, and you look at these different figures, you'll see that although some figures are shown in profile, such as the stag and Saint Eustace. I should tell you the story of Saint Eustace. He is obviously a nobleman from his beautiful courtly costume, and he's riding along through the forest, and he sees a stag, and between the antlers of the stag is a crucifix. And because of this miracle, Saint Eustace converts to Christianity and, of course, becomes a saint. So we have that interest in the animals. We have the stag, we have the horse, but we also have other animals. There's other deer in this forest. Some turned so that their back is toward us, some in profile. We have the hunting dogs who have come along with the saint. And you have sort of whippets or greyhound type of figures and some spaniel-looking dogs. One of them is chasing the hare. So there's some that are in profile, and you think of very heraldic-looking animals that they could almost be on a coat of arms or something like that. And yet others turn in space. And when you look at each of them, you also realize that they indeed are very naturalistic. He has observed these from life and drawn them and then placed them in his painting. If you look really closely, you can even see that there are, there's landscape, there's water, and there's trees. Sometimes the trees are smaller than the stags, so maybe not everything in the landscape is to scale. But certainly he has his naturalistic detail in the animals and in the costume. And I'd say this would be something that would appeal to an aristocratic court. One of the other things that Pisanello did is invent, as far as we know, the Renaissance portrait medal. The very first one, which I will show you, is the portrait of John Palaeologus. And we also see, and here I'm just showing you for the example, but we'll look at it again, the very first medal of a woman that was struck in the Renaissance, and this is Cecilia Gonzaga. Here is the medal of Pisanello. Here is the medal of John Palaeologus. You may remember that John Palaeologus was the last Byzantine emperor, and that he came to Italy in 1438-39. He was at the Council of Florence. He traveled to Ferrara, which is presumably where Pisanello would have taken his portrait. And this medal was struck in honor of his visit. And the way the portrait medals were shown was that you would have a figure on one side in profile, in bust length, or you'll say later maybe half length. And that would be an imitation of Roman coins, where Caesar would be shown in profile. And then on the back, there would often be perhaps an allegorical scene or a scene that refers to something of the person who is portrayed on the recto. And here, I don't know of a symbolism here. We have John on a horse, and we have another horse from the rear. Perhaps a reference to the fact that he had to journey, but I'm just guessing there. You'll notice that they are also inscribed with the name of the person. And you can see on the recto, opus Pisani, so the work of Pisanello. And here you have the portrait medal of Cecilia Gonzaga. Now, she was the daughter of the Marchese of Mantua, the ruler of Mantua. And she's quite remarkable in woman's history because her father hired the most remarkable educator. And he founded a school for the Gonzaga family and presumably other people to attend. It was called the House of Joy because it was so joyful to learn. And Cecilia was allowed to learn with her brothers. And in some of the humanist scholars felt that women, at least these patrician women, should also be allowed to have a classical education. And certainly this was the idea of her teacher, Victorina da Feltro. And so we have a document where he's writing a letter to someone, and he says that Cecilia Gonzaga, who is 7 years old, has already mastered Latin, and he's looking for a textbook for her to teach her Greek. So she learned Greek at the age of 7, having already mastered Latin. So she was, a perfect example of the fact that women could be educated in the same way as men. She became a nun and died fairly young. It's interesting that the verso of the medal does not show her, does not refer to her studies. You don't see an open book or the goddess Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. What you have is an allegory of chastity. And so you have this figure who presumably represents innocence or chastity. And here's an example of the fact that you don't have to be completely clothed to be innocent or chaste in an allegorical figure. And we see a unicorn. The unicorn is, of course, the symbol of chastity. And so this is certainly a reference to her purity, keeps up her reputation. It was often said that men had many virtues, but women only one, which was the virtue of chastity, which was the one that was really cared about by the men, I guess. At any rate, it's a wonderful medal to think of this woman who didn't live long, but had such erudition in her time. I should say a few things about the graceful qualities of the profile view and her hair tied up, revealing this beautiful curving neck. And of course, she looks very solemn, is appropriate for a daughter of the aristocracy.